Hello everyone and welcome to ARPIT course. I am Vijay Kumar Verma, working as Assistant Librarian Senior Scale in IIT Delhi. Today we are going to discuss basics of electronic resource management or ERM as it is commonly known. As we know that electronic resources play a very important role for research and development. Libraries all over the world are acquiring electronic resources for their stakeholders. The electronic resources having different characteristics and nature as compared to print resources. The principle which you apply for the management of printed resources can't be applied for the management of electronic resources because of the nature of electronic resources. Most of the time we think that only the procurement and providing access are the only functions associated with electronic resource management, but this is not the case. Electronic resource management is a very broad and complex process, and there are many steps involved with electronic resource management. My lecture today will focus on why libraries are acquiring electronic resources, what is ERM, what is life cycle of ERM, why should we go for ERM. Then we will discuss the current global scenario of ERM and we will have a glimpse of some existing electronic resource management system. After the lecture, we will have the understanding of the life cycle of electronic resources, how the electronic resources are being managed globally and what are the important software available for electronic resource management. Now, we know the resources have always been playing very vital role in functioning and development of human society. Of course, the nature of resources change with needs and growth of society. We can see the journey of human civilization from the agrarian to industrial to post-industrial society, which is also termed as knowledge society. In all this journey, information resources having a very important role to play. However, the transmission of information was not institutional for a long time, but with the invention of paper, there is fueled of the growth of recording, communication and adaptability of information resources. The widespread use of information led to systematic development of information handling entities like libraries and other centers like information processing center, information resource center, knowledge center, etc. These centers were responsible for possession, processing, retrieval, dissemination and preservation of the resources. This information handling entity usually kept the information in printing format, but with the development of the technology and availability of different media of information and storage and communication, the possession, processing, retrieval, dissemination and preservation of information resources have changed to a great extent. This led to shifting in availability of resources from print to electronic. Now, the question is why library should acquire electronic resources. You see, there are various reasons for acquiring electronic resources. One of the prominent reasons is the shifting of publication from print to e. If you see the recent trend, more than 90% of science, technology and medicine journals are available online. If you see the trends in humanities, social sciences and arts, this is approximately 85%. That means more the content are available in electronic format, and since the content are available in electronic format, then library have to acquire this format, because publishers are also pushing more content in electronic format to the market. Now, the second prominent reason for acquiring electronic resources by the libraries is the various advantage of electronic resources over print resources. We see electronic resources having the various advantages, like electronic resources can be easily integrated with the other system. One of the most important advantage of electronic resources is it can be searchable, it can be linked with the discovery services. That means there is a ease of discovery. there is a instantaneous access, and apart from this, the large quantity of information can be captured in a very small space. This is another reason for what the library are going to acquire more electronic resources over the period of time. Now, the third reason for acquiring electronic resources is influence of emerging format and tools. Libraries are acquiring information resources because information resources are available in different formats and there are different tools to gather them. For the example, we know about the demand driven acquisition, we know about the pattern driven acquisition, we know archive access, remote access, all these things were not possible in the case of the print resources, hence the library are acquiring electronic resources. The next prominent reason for acquiring electronic resources is the influence of ICT and portable devices. With the passing of time, ICT has played very prominent role in the different sphere of our life, and the library is not the isolated entity. Library has also influenced by ICT and this role. Due to ICT, the acquisition of e-resources have changed significantly in the library. The cheap internet, availability of portable devices, the concept of BYOD, bring your own device, etc., has pushed the library to acquire more electronic resources. But we have to see that apart from the various advantages, the shift from print to electronic resources has also brought many challenges to us, to the libraries, and the management perspective is one of the most important challenge. As we know that libraries are subscribing more, subscribing both the simple and complex e-resources, and managing of these resources are different to each other. If there is delay in management, then this led to complexities of all this thing. Now, at least 2 decades has been already passed after the advent of electronic resources. Librarians are still grappling to manage electronic resources properly, because the principle applied for the managing of print resources can't be applied for the managing of electronic resources. There are some important reasons for not applying this principle. One of the prominent reasons is access versus holding. What happens in case of the print resources? In case of the print resources, we have the physical holding of the resources. We were the owner of the resources. Now, this trend has changed with electronic resources. Now, library having the access of electronic resources instead of the physical holding. The electronic resources are on the server of third party. We have only access by the legal document, that is called the license agreement we signed with the service provider, publisher or aggregator. Hence, this is the one of the prominent reason by which the same principle can't be applied with the case of the electronic resources. Now, the second is the nature. You see, the print resources were available with us in different types, like we had reference book, encyclopedia, and different kind of documents like atlas, etc. And all these resources were available in single form, that is the print form. But now, this is not the case with the electronic resources. Electronic resources are available in different form and in different format. They are online journals, they might be in CD, they might be in other electronic communication medium. This leads to difficulties management of these resources. Now, the third important thing is licensing. You see, we do not have any phenomena like licensing associated with print resources, because when we purchase print resources, we keep it in the library and that print resources become our property. That means, it's become the property of the library. But with the electronic resources, there is an important provision comes, and that provision is licensing. Licensing is the legal provision which governs the access and many of the other aspects of the electronic resources. This was not the case of the print resources. Hence, the principle which we apply for the management of print resources can't be applied for the management of electronic resources. Another thing is a complex life cycle. Electronic resources have been very complex life cycle. In coming part of my lecture, we will discuss the life cycle of electronic resources, but in case of the print resources there was no life cycle associated, but in case of electronic resources having life cycle, and that life cycle is very complex. Now, the last aspect is preservation aspect. You see, in case of the print resources, we have a different way of preserving it. We keep it in a particular place, we do many preservation process in the case of the books and other thing. But in case of electronic resources, the preservation concept is totally different. In case of electronic resources, since we do not have any physical holding, we have the access, the electronic resources are in the third party server, then the preservation is a very cumbersome aspect and preservation is a very important aspect to be considered. For the example, if we cancel any electronic resources, what is the guarantee that we will have the access of that resources? Then we have to see it. We should have the provision, preservation provision, post cancellation access and all these things we have to take care of with the electronic resources, and that is the very important thing, and this was not in the case of print resources. Hence, these are the some of the basic thing which we discuss and come to know that the principle applied for the management of the print resources can't be applied for the management of electronic resources. Now, the question comes, what is electronic resource management? Basically, ERM covers practices and techniques involved in the investigation, selection, acquisition, licensing, access, maintenance, evaluation, retention and preservation of electronic resources of a library. Hence, if we see management aspect of electronic resources, we find that there are many complex processes associated with it. Sometimes these processes are performed standalone and in many cases they are interrelated. All these practices and techniques associated for managing the electronic resources are termed as life cycle of electronic resources. Now, let us discuss one by one in detail, so that we have an idea how do we manage electronic resources and what are the various procedure, process and techniques involved with electronic resource management. You see, this is the life cycle of electronic resource management. It starts from investigation to preservation. In between, we have acquisition, implementation, evaluation, review. These are the basic steps involved. Now, in case of investigation, investigation is the first step of electronic resource management life cycle. In investigation, we do all the process and procedure and apply all the techniques before acquiring an electronic resource. For the example, if we have to acquire any new electronic resource, then first of all we should know who is our potential user, for whom we are going to acquire the electronic resource. After knowing our potential user, we go for the review of the market, literature, we talk to our colleague, we come to know about if there be the subscription of resource in any particular institution, then we come to know how the performance of that resource was, how was the supplier, then we talk to the supplier. Then the very important thing is that we go for the sustainability check. Then we have to go for the overlap analysis. We see whether we have the similar type of resources or the same resources subscribed to our library or not. Now, after that we go for the platform choice, from whom we have to procure the resources, whether we have to procure it from the publisher or whether we have to procure it from the aggregator, because we have both the options of the procurement. After that we go for the trial set if there is a flexibility for that, and based on the trial we should have a feedback mechanism, we should get the feedback from the user, and ultimately everything, every process should be documented, recorded, and if it pass, then we go for the acquisition of the resources. That is the next step of the life cycle of ERM. Now, in case of acquisition, we go for price negotiation. That is a very important thing, because in case of the e-resources, the price is big. we totally depends upon the price quoted by the publisher or aggregator or the supplier from whom we want to procure the resources. Hence, the negotiation is an important step, and this negotiation can be carried out to also drop the price and also to get to know the various features of that resources. Then one of the very important thing is the review the license to see what are the terms and conditions mentioned in the license. We will discuss in detail just later on, and after everything is in order, then we go for ordering and we ask for the metadata in MARC, so that we can put it in our web OPEC and other systems, so that user can access it. Now, in case of acquisition, licensing is very important thing, and that this is the licensing which based on that we can get the access of the resources, we will have the post cancellation access and many other things are associated. Hence, the review of license is very important. Some of the important factors we should have to consider while signing a license is that we should have the definition of user, that should be properly mentioned in the license. Who will be the user of that electronic resource or database? Will it only for the institution student or faculty member, or alumni can also get access, even walk-in access would be there or not? There would be the remote access provision also, there would be the definition of site. If institution having a system concern, or if the institution having more than 1 or 2 department site, so will it be available to all departments and all site is irrespective of the library or central library which is subscribing the resources. Then very important thing is that the resource should be counter compliance. We should have usage statistics, and that usage statistics should be provided by the aggregator in the third party platform and should be mentioned in the license agreement also. Now, there should be the provision for linking the resource with the discovery tool, and that should also be in license agreement, and we have to see it. We should have the post cancellation access clause, like we should have the mention of the locks, clocks, portico and the other arrangement of electronic resources after the cancellation. Now, one of the very important thing which I want to highlight is the jurisdiction, because in most of the license agreement the jurisdiction is mentioned to the country of the origin of the resource, but we should have the jurisdiction of the resource subscribing country. For example, if you are subscribing resources for institutions situated in Delhi, take the example of IIT Delhi. So, it should be under Delhi jurisdiction, and the law applicable should be the law of India. We should also see is there any DRMs, is there any platform fee associated with the resources, and we have to see the auto renewal clause, because in many of the license agreement they have the terms that resource will be automatically renewed after a period of certain time, like 1 year, 2 year, etc. We have to see this thing also. Now, the third important thing of the life cycle of electronic resource management is the implementation. Now, in case of the implementation, we have the we already subscribed, we already acquired the resources. Now, the implementation process, we have to provide the access to the user. That access can be in the form of OPEC integration, the MARC record which I have already got, that can be integrated. The second thing, we have to link the resources, integrate the resources with the discovery tool or make A to Z list. All these things are different way by which we can provide the access. Apart from this, we should have the admin module, so that we have the record of problem log, we should have the record of hardware, software need and other thing. And the marketing is also very important aspect, because we are subscribing the resources for our user. Hence, the user should come to know which are the resources we have subscribed, and for that we go for the marketing. Marketing can be done by the circular mail, by email and other thing. Then we also check the remote access logging, whether the resource we subscribe is available for the remote access or not. One important thing for the implementation process is the feedback mechanism. We should have a proper feedback mechanism, so that if there is any problem in the user, so that we come to know about that. Now, the next step is evaluation. Evaluation is after implementation, in which we evaluate the resources which we subscribe before the retention, that means before cancellation or renew of the resources. For evaluation, we should have the analysis of the user feedback, we have the analysis of downtime, we should have the analysis of the problem log, we should have analysis of usage statistics, cost per article, and based on that we either go for the cancellation or go for the renewal. If we are going for the cancellation, then we have to go for the preservation aspect of this one, and we see the terms mentioned in the license agreement, that is how the access post cancellation access should be provided either through logs, clocks, portico or by any other mean like our own server. And if we renew the resources, then life cycle of ERM which we have discussed is repeated. Now, in preservation we have already discussed, this can be, we have to see the license agreement provision, what are the provision mentioned in the license agreement, and based on that we should have post cancellation access. Now, based on the nature of the resources and the format of resources, life cycle of ERM can be implemented, and it depends what type of resources we are going to procure. For the example, if we are going to procure e-book on the perpetual basis, then the review and renew step will not be implemented. If you see the global and Indian scenario, we find that most of the library do not follow the life cycle of the electronic resource management. Even they are following the few process or procedure, they are in the isolated state and not connected to each other. Even sometimes there are problem of compatibility with different system. A brief study of global scenario has been done. For the example, a study conducted by Digital Library Foundation UK found that the digital collection development is the greatest source of anxiety and uncertainty among the librarian. Similarly, more than 30 different tools are used by the librarian all over the world to manage electronic resources, and in most of the cases these tools are not interconnected. For the example, they put the license in the paper file, they put the vendor contact in Excel, and other things are also involved. And since all these systems are isolated, it is very difficult for them to integrate. Now, a survey conducted by Rathmel found that 96% of the librarian out of the sample size of 343 use email for recording, tracking and archiving problem. And when the time comes to find out any important communication, it is very difficult for us to track. Hence, a proper management of electronic resources is required. We should not only depend on the email system. Now, most of the library do not follow the detailed workflow. Of course, this is a survey carried out Emery in 2016 found, and there is a gap between LSP, library service provider, and ERM workflow. There is a survey conducted by Single and Natchez in 2017 found that the prominent LSP are not able to accommodate all the workflow of electronic resources. Now, this is the reason why we need electronic resource management system. We need electronic resource management system because the nature of a resources is very much complex, and we have already seen the normal spreadsheet and even the LSP and other standalone software and systems not able to manage it. There is a fragmented approach of ERM. For that we need ERMs. Libraries are spending a huge sum of money of electronic resources, and to get the maximum advantage of electronic resources, we should have the electronic resource management system. And the meaningful matrix is important aspect, because the metrics like usage statistics and other things which we get many of the time are not authentic in many cases. They are not as per our requirement. Hence, to get authentic and useful metrics which we can easily interpret, easily manage, we require ERMs, and this also requires the saving of the time. Now, the question comes, what is ERMs? Electronic Resource Management System is a system that supports management of information and workflow necessary to efficiently select, evaluate, acquire, maintain and provide informed access to electronic resources in accordance with their business and license term. Now, if you see the core capability of electronic resource management system, the first important thing is that electronic resource management system should customize itself or should handle the workflow and communication of ERM life cycle. The second important thing that ERMs should able to upload license file and the metadata related to license agreement, because very important. It should be interoperable, it should be compatible, it should be easy and navigate. Since we have already seen that ERM is a very complex process and there are many processes, steps and procedure are involved with ERM, but ERMs should not be so heavy, it should be light, it should be such a way that the librarian can handle it. There should be the different level of permission, of course, is very important for maintenance of the hierarchy, and it should be ability to inform administrative information and should be secure also, because security is a very important thing for ERMs. Now, come for the basic data element of ERMs. You see, ERMs is a system which can manage life cycle of electronic resources. Now, electronic resources having the various features. Based on that, some of the important basic data element for ERMs should be the descriptive data, licensing data, financial, administrative support and tool and access. Like in case of the descriptive data fields, we should have title, holding, ISSN, etc. In case of the licensing, we should have ILL right, authorized, we should have license metadata entry and other thing. In case of the financial element, we should have price cap, relationship with the print journal if any. For the administrative support, it should capable to store administrative password, vendor contact info and other things. For the access, it should have the access authorization method. Now, we have already come to know what is ERMs. By the definition of ERMs, we know that this is a system which can be applied to manage workflow of electronic resources. There are many major ERMs which can manage electronic resources globally. In the following part of my lecture, I will be analyzing some of the major ERMs which are both commercial and open source. While I do not have direct experience with any product except Coral, the review is based on the information available on the website of this product. It is by no means comprehensive and should not be taken as the final word on any of the system or vendor. It is not the complete list or a complete review of any of this product, but an attempt to get user familiarized with some ERMs. These are the 3 ERMs I have covered. They are EBSCO ERM Essential, 360 Resource Manager from the ProQuest, and the Coral, which is the open source ERMs. Now, EBSCO Essential having many features, like we can get access to all e-resources data in single click. We have the flexibility to create different type of reports. We should have the flexibility to keep trial. We can simplify our renewal process. We can streamline the workflow of electronic resources, and there are customized field for this one for entry of the different fields in the electronic resources. Now, 360 Resource Manager is from the ProQuest, and some of the important feature of 360 Resource Manager is consolidated and organized subscription data, improve reporting and analysis, share the inherent resources and metadata, streamline the acquisition and licensing workflow, help make better collection decision, enable rapid implementation and use of ERM. Now, Coral is a open source software and not proprietary item of any company, and there are 5 modules of Coral. They are resources in which assist the organization of order and the resource data management. Licensing is assist in organizing and storing licensing documentation. Organization module is the contact and other account for the publisher vendor consortia. Usage statistics, we can get the usage statistics of SUSI and counter through this module, and the management is the module which is used for organizing a document like policies, workflow, procedure, etc. Now, there are various challenges of ERM. One of the most important challenge is the complex life cycle. We have already mentioned it. I have discussed about that. The availability of various forms and formats also poses the challenges of electronic resource management. there is a dynamic nature of electronic resources, which is a major challenge for its management, and the consortia versus individual approach, because a library is getting the resources either from the consortia or procure it individually. These resources should be treated differently. Hence, it is very challenging to manage way of resources by which we get it. In conclusion, we can say that there is a global shift in the publication and acquisition of resources from print to electronic, and there is no doubt that libraries need a system to manage their electronic resources. The system is also required for comprehensive report generation and analysis for decision making. Such a system should not be a standalone, it should support the existing system. I thank you all, and I duly acknowledge the scholars and website content provider whose material I use in my presentation. Thanks again, and for any further query you can contact on my email ID vkverma@library.iitd.ac.in. Thank you.